The first thing Emma noticed when she woke up was the sterile smell of disinfectant. The steady beep of a machine echoed in the background, and bright fluorescent lights blurred her vision. She blinked, trying to focus, but the world felt hazy, distant. A dull pain throbbed in her head, and when she lifted her hand to touch her face, she winced at the sensation of bandages covering her forehead. Where am I? A wave of panic surged through her as she tried to sit up, but a firm hand on her arm stopped her. Easy, Emma. Don't rush it. The voice was calm, reassuring, but she didn't recognize it. Emma turned her head slowly, her vision sharpening just enough to make out the face of a woman in a white coat. A doctor, judging by the stethoscope hanging around her neck. Where am I? Emma croaked, her throat dry and her voice weak. What happened? The doctor smiled gently, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. You're in the hospital. You were in a car accident. Do you remember anything about what happened? Car accident. The words rattled in Emma's mind, but there was no memory to match them. She tried to think, to grasp onto something familiar, but her mind was blank, like a book with the pages ripped out. She shook her head, her heart racing. I don't. Emma swallowed hard. I don't remember. The doctor's expression didn't change. She had probably seen this kind of reaction before. That's okay. It's normal to feel disoriented after a trauma like this. Memory loss can be temporary. Your brain just needs time to heal. Time. Emma latched onto the word, hoping it was true. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't recall anything before waking up in this bed. No namas, no faças, no moments. It was as if her entire life had been erased. Is anyone here? She asked, her voice trembling. My family. The doctor nodded. Yes, your parents are outside. And someone else. A man. He's been very worried about you. A man? Emma's confusion deepened. But before she could ask any more questions, the door to her room swung open. Her mother rushed in first, her face a mix of relief and worry. Emma felt a surge of familiarity. Her mother's face was something she should know, but instead, there was only a distant recognition, like seeing a photograph of someone you should remember, but don't. Emma, sweetheart, her mother said, tears in her eyes. She gently brushed Emma's hair away from her face, her touch warm but fragile. Thank God you're awake. We've been so worried. Behind her mother stood her father, looking pale and drained, but smiling softly. Emma stared at them, desperately searching for any flicker of memory, but nothing came. I'm sorry, Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't remember you. Her mother's face crumpled, but she quickly masked her sadness with a forced smile. That's okay, honey. The doctor said this might happen. You just need time. Emma nodded, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. How much time? Would her memories ever come back? Her father stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We're just glad you're awake. That's what matters. Emma wanted to believe that, but the emptiness inside her felt unbearable. She didn't know who she was. How could she possibly know if she was okay? Suddenly, there was movement behind her parents, and a man stepped into the room. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and a face lined with exhaustion. His eyes locked onto Emma with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. There was something in the way he looked at her, something deep and raw, like he was waiting for her to recognize him. But she didn't. Emma, he said softly, taking a step closer. You don't know me, do you? Emma blinked, shaking her head slowly. No, I don't. The man's shoulders slumped slightly, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he quickly composed himself. He moved closer to her bed, his voice gentle, but filled with an emotion Emma couldn't place. My name is Alex. We've been together for a while. We're engaged. Engaged? The word echoed in her mind, but it felt foreign, like it didn't belong to her. She stared at him, trying to make sense of the situation, but there was nothing. No flicker of recognition, no warmth of familiarity. "I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I don't remember you either." Alex smiled, but it was strained. "That's okay. I knew this could happen. The doctors told me about the memory loss, but I'm here for you. I'll help you remember." Emma glanced at her parents, searching for some kind of confirmation, and her mother nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. "It's true, Emma. Alex has been by your side since the accident. You two were very close." The weight of their words pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. This man, Alex, was someone she was supposed to love. But all she felt was confusion, as if he were a stranger standing in front of her, telling her a story that wasn't hers. "I don't know what to say," Emma whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't feel anything." Alex knelt beside her bed, reaching out to gently take her hand. "It's okay, Emma. I understand. This is a lot to take in, but I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Emma looked down at their joined hands. His touch was warm, familiar, but her heart didn't react. There was no spark, no rush of emotion. Nothing. Over the next few days, Emma's hospital room became a revolving door of doctors, nurses, and well-wishers. Friends from her past life. People she couldn't remember visited, offering words of support, sharing stories, and trying to jog her memory. But it was all a blur, a sea of unfamiliar faces and names that meant nothing to her. Through it all, Alex remained by her side, his presence constant and unwavering. He told her stories of their life together, how they met at a mutual friend's party, how they had fallen in love over late-night phone calls and weekend getaways. He brought her photos of their time together, pictures of them smiling, holding hands, laughing. But looking at those images was like looking at someone else's life. She didn't recognize the woman in the pictures, and she certainly didn't recognize the love she was supposed to feel for the man sitting beside her. "I don't understand," Emma said one evening, frustration bubbling up inside her. "How can I be engaged to you and not remember anything? How can I not feel anything?" Alex's face tightened, but he forced a smile. "It's the memory loss, Emma. The doctors said it'll take time. We have to be patient." Emma stared at him, her heart heavy with doubt. "What if I never remember? What if I don't love you?" Alex's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Emma saw a flash of something. Fear, maybe even desperation, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You will," he said, his voice steady. "You loved me before, and you'll love me again." But as the days passed and Emma's memories remained locked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was no spark, no instinct pulling her back to Alex. And despite his reassurances, Emma couldn't help but wonder if the love he spoke of was real, or if it was a story he desperately wanted her to believe. What would you do if you woke up with no memory and someone claimed you were in love? Would you trust their version of your past? Or would you be suspicious? Let me know how you would handle Emma's situation. The days that followed felt like a blur, as Emma's life became a patchwork of strange faces, disjointed stories, and hollow memories. Her parents visited regularly, bringing home-cooked meals and trying to ease her back into the world she had forgotten. Alex was always by her side, patient and hopeful, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was living someone else's life. No matter how hard she tried, she still felt nothing for him. No recognition, no affection. She returned to her apartment a week after leaving the hospital. It was supposed to be her home, but everything inside felt foreign. The furniture, the decor, even the clothes in her closet. Alex had offered to stay with her to help her adjust, but Emma declined. She needed space to breathe, to process, to figure out who she was on her own. Her first night back was restless. She walked through each room, touching things in the hope that they would trigger a memory, something that would help her remember her past. But nothing did. The apartment felt sterile, like a hotel she had never stayed in before. She found a framed photo of her and Alex on the mantel, smiling, carefree, But the woman in the photo didn't feel like her. She barely recognized her own face. She sat down on the couch and stared at her phone, scrolling through old messages from friends and family. Everyone was kind, supportive, but there was one name that appeared over and over in the messages: Daniel. Daniel, just checking in. Let me know if you need anything. Daniel, hope you're feeling better. Take your time getting back to work. Daniel, I'll be here when you're ready. She didn't remember anyone named Daniel, but his text felt different, warmer. There was something about the way he reached out, more concerned than the casual text from friends. Emma hesitated before responding. Daniel, I'm sorry, I don't remember you, but thank you for reaching out. How do I know you? His reply was quick. We worked together at the magazine. You were my editor. That explains it, she thought, feeling a little embarrassed for reading too much into his messages. She replied with a brief thank you and put the phone down, wondering what her life at work had been like before the accident. The next morning, Alex came over unannounced. Emma was still in her pajamas, nursing a cup of coffee, when she heard the knock on the door. She opened it to find him standing there with a bouquet of lilies and a hopeful smile. I thought I'd surprise you, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I know things have been tough, but I figured maybe today we could do something fun. Emma forced a smile, accepting the flowers. Thanks, Alex, but I'm not really in the mood for fun today. Come on, he urged. Just a walk in the park, maybe? We used to love doing that together. She hesitated. He was trying so hard, and she knew it was unfair to push him away. But every time she was around him, the distance between them felt insurmountable. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Alex's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. I get it, I do. I just miss you. I miss us. There it was again, that look in his eyes like he was holding on to something she couldn't see, something she wasn't sure had ever existed in the first place. I'm sorry, Alex, Emma said softly, her hands trembling slightly. I'm trying, but I still don't remember anything. And I don't feel, she stopped, unsure of how to finish. You don't feel the way you used to, Alex said quietly, his voice tight. I understand. But that's why I'm here, to help you remember. I know it's still in there, Emma. The love we had. It has to be. Emma bit her lip, the guilt twisting inside her. She wanted to believe him, to trust that they had shared something beautiful before the accident. But no matter how many stories he told her, no matter how many memories he tried to share, her heart remained stubbornly silent. I need more time, she finally said. I'm still figuring things out. Alex nodded, but the disappointment in his eyes was hard to miss. Of course, take as much time as you need. He left soon after, and Emma collapsed onto the couch, exhausted by the effort of pretending. She knew Alex was trying to help, but every time he was around, she felt trapped by the weight of the relationship he was so determined to salvage. It was like trying to fit into someone else's life, and nothing felt right. Later that afternoon, Emma decided to take a walk by herself, hoping some fresh air would clear her mind. She wandered through the park near her apartment, the early autumn breeze tugging at her hair. She noticed a couple sitting on a bench nearby, laughing together, their heads bent close. The sight of them stirred something deep inside her, a strange, hollow ache that she couldn't quite place. She thought of Alex, of how he had described their relationship, their love. Shouldn't she feel that way when she was with him? Shouldn't there be at least a spark, something to remind her of what they once shared? But there was nothing, and that empty feeling, the lack of connection, scared her more than the memory loss itself. As she walked, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. I hope I didn't overstep earlier. I know things must be confusing right now. Emma paused, staring at the message. There was something comforting about his tone, something that didn't feel forced. She hesitated for a moment, then typed back. It's okay. I guess I'm just trying to figure out who I was before the accident. Daniel's reply came quickly. I can't imagine how hard that must be. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. She stared at the words, feeling an unexpected warmth. She barely knew Daniel. At least she didn't remember knowing him. But there was a sincerity in his offer that felt real, more genuine than the forced cheerfulness of everyone else. Maybe we could meet up sometime. She typed, her heart racing as she hit send. Just to talk. About work, I mean. The next day, Emma found herself sitting across from Daniel at a small cafe near her apartment. He was handsome, with dark hair and an easy smile, but there was something more than that. Something familiar about him that tugged at the edges of her mind, though she couldn't place it. "I'm really glad you reached out," Daniel said, taking a sip of his coffee. "I didn't want to overwhelm you, but I wanted you to know I'm here if you need anything." Emma smiled, relaxing a little. "Thank you. Honestly, it's been hard. Everyone keeps telling me who I was and what I should be feeling, but I don't know what's real anymore." Daniel nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I can't imagine how overwhelming that must be." They talked for a while, mostly about work, what the magazine was like, how Emma had been a tough but fair editor. But as the conversation continued, Emma noticed the way Daniel looked at her, a hint of something deeper behind his words. There was a connection there, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't the forced pressure she felt with Alex, but something quieter, more natural. At one point, Daniel's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "You and we worked pretty closely before the accident. We were good friends." "Friends," Emma repeated, feeling a strange pang of uncertainty. The way he said it, it sounded like there was more to the story. "Was that all we were?" Daniel's eyes flickered with something, regret, hesitation, but he smiled and shook his head. "Yeah, just friends." Emma nodded, though the nagging feeling in the back of her mind didn't go away. There was something about Daniel that felt different. Familiar, yes, but in a way that felt deeper than what he was letting on. She didn't know what it meant, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like there was more to her story than the version Alex had been telling. That night, as Emma lay in bed, she found herself thinking about Daniel. There was something about him that stirred her, something she couldn't explain. She had barely known him before the accident, or at least that's what she thought, but her heart seemed to react to him in a way it didn't with Alex. It was confusing, unsettling. As she drifted off to sleep, she had a fleeting image flash through her mind. A memory, maybe. She saw herself standing on a balcony at night, her hand resting on someone's shoulder. She couldn't see their face, but she felt warmth, comfort. She felt something real. Her heart pounded as she sat up in bed, the memory fading as quickly as it had come. Who was she with? What do you think is going on with Emma's memories? Could her heart be trying to tell her something her mind can't yet recall? Would you trust your instincts or the people around you if you were in her situation? Let me know your thoughts. The days following Emma's meeting with Daniel were filled with a growing sense of unease. Her conversations with him had been easy, natural, in a way she hadn't felt with anyone else since waking up in that hospital bed. The connection between them was undeniable, but he seemed determined to keep things on a surface level, sticking to small talk and avoiding anything too personal. It only made Emma more curious. She had hoped for more memories to return, something solid that would explain the strange feeling she got around him. But aside from the occasional fleeting image, fragments of laughter, warm evenings, and a familiar voice, they remained stubbornly out of reach. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much of her life still felt like a mystery. Alex continued to hover, his presence suffocating. He stopped by often, always with the same hopeful smile, always trying to rekindle something Emma couldn't remember ever existing. She knew he was trying, but instead of comforting her, it only made her feel like she was drowning under the weight of his expectations. One night, after another strained dinner with Alex, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts swirling. The same question kept creeping back. Why don't I feel anything for him? Every time Alex spoke about their relationship, about the future they had supposedly planned together, it felt like a story someone else had lived, not her. And then there was Daniel. Why had his presence stirred something in her? Why did she feel more at ease with him? Even though Alex had been the one claiming they were deeply in love. Determined to find answers, Emma made a decision. She couldn't just sit and wait for her memories to come back. She needed to dig deeper, find out who she really was before the accident, not just rely on the version Alex was giving her. And if Daniel wasn't telling her the full story, she would figure that out too. The next day, Emma visited the magazine where she had worked before the accident. She hadn't returned to work since her memory loss, but she knew she had to start somewhere if she was going to uncover the truth. Her coworkers welcomed her back warmly, though their smiles were tinged with pity, as if they weren't quite sure how to talk to her anymore. The editor-in-chief, a sharp woman named Brenda, gave her a firm but sympathetic look. "I'm glad you're feeling well enough to visit," Brenda said, leading Emma into her office. "We've all been worried about you." "Thanks, Brenda," Emma replied, sitting down in the chair opposite her desk. "I'm still trying to piece things together, so I thought maybe coming back here might help. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about how things were before the accident?" Brenda leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Of course. What do you want to know?" Emma hesitated, trying to phrase her question carefully. "I've been told a lot about my life before the accident, but I feel like I'm missing something. Was there anyone here? Anyone I worked closely with who was important to me? Personally, I mean." Brenda raised an eyebrow. "Well, you work closely with a lot of people. You were the editorial manager, after all. But if you're asking about someone special, yes, there was someone." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Brenda folded her hands on the desk, her expression serious. "Daniel. You and he were close. I don't know all the details, but it was clear that you two had something deeper than just a professional relationship. You didn't broadcast it, but people noticed. Especially Alex." Emma's breath caught. "Alex knew?" Brenda nodded slowly. "Yes, there was some tension between the two of them before your accident. Alex didn't work here, of course, but he would show up sometimes. We all got the sense that things weren't great between you two, but I don't know how much of that was related to Daniel." Emma's pulse quickened. "What do you mean by tension? Did something happen between them?" Brenda sighed, her expression softening. "I don't know the details, Emma, but I remember one evening, a few days before the accident, you left the office early. Daniel seemed worried, and he left shortly after. The next day, you didn't come into work, and the day after that, we heard about the accident." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had been seeing Daniel. Her instincts had been right, but why hadn't Alex told her? He had been by her side every day since the accident, insisting they had been in love, that they had been engaged, but he had never mentioned Daniel. "I think I need to talk to Daniel," Emma said, standing up abruptly. Brenda stood too, her expression unreadable. "Be careful, Emma. Don't rush into things too quickly. You've been through a lot." Emma nodded, but her mind was already racing. She needed to talk to Daniel. She needed to understand why her heart felt like it had been pulling her toward him, why he seemed to hesitate every time they talked, and most importantly, why Alex had been hiding the truth. That evening, Emma texted Daniel, asking if they could meet up. Her hands trembled as she sent the message, the sense of urgency growing stronger. He replied quickly, suggesting they meet at a quiet bar downtown. When Emma arrived, Daniel was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, his expression serious. She sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I need to know the truth," Emma said, skipping the pleasantries. "About us. About what happened before the accident." Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was hoping you wouldn't push this, Emma. I didn't want to overwhelm you." "You're not overwhelming me. You're leaving me in the dark." Emma shot back, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I've had people telling me what my life was supposed to be, but none of it feels right. And now I find out we were more than just friends." Daniel's eyes softened, and he leaned forward. "Emma, it wasn't supposed to be this way. You and I, we were together. We kept it quiet because of work, but we were happy. At least, I thought we were." Emma's heart raced. "What happened? Why didn't Alex tell me any of this?" Daniel's jaw tightened, and he looked away for a moment before answering. Alex didn't want to lose you. When he found out about us, he was furious. You were planning to break things off with him, but then the accident happened. And, I don't know, maybe he saw it as a second chance. Emma felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. So he lied to me? He said we were engaged. He said we were in love. Daniel shook his head. No, you weren't engaged, Emma. You and Alex were barely hanging on. You were going to end it for good, but he's using your memory loss to rewrite history. Emma's stomach twisted, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you come forward? I tried, Daniel said, his voice thick with regret. But when you woke up, you didn't remember me. And Alex was always there. I thought maybe you'd be better off without the mess I'd bring into your life. Emma felt a wave of anger and confusion crash over her. So you just let him manipulate me? I didn't know what else to do, Daniel said quietly. I didn't want to push you, and I thought maybe you'd remember on your own. Emma sat back, her mind spinning. Everything Alex had told her was a lie. The love he'd been clinging to, the future he'd promised, they were all built on a foundation of deception. And Daniel, the man she had felt drawn to without knowing why, had stayed silent, letting Alex control the narrative. She stood abruptly, her hands shaking. I need to talk to Alex. Later that night, Emma found herself standing outside Alex's apartment, her heart pounding as she prepared to confront him. She had rehearsed the conversation in her head 100 times on the way over, but now that she was here, her stomach churned with uncertainty. She knocked on the door, her fists clenched. A moment later, Alex opened it, his face lighting up when he saw her. Emma, hey, he said, stepping aside to let her in. I wasn't expecting you. Emma walked past him, her heart racing. We need to talk. Alex frowned, sensing the shift in her tone. What's wrong? Emma turned to face him, her eyes blazing. I talked to Daniel. The color drained from Alex's face. Daniel? What did he tell you? He told me the truth, Emma said, her voice trembling with anger. About us. About the fact that we weren't engaged. About how I was going to leave you before the accident. Alex's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of desperation in his eyes. Emma, listen. I know this is confusing, but you don't understand what we had. You loved me once. You'll love me again. I know it. Emma shook her head, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. You lied to me, Alex. You used my memory loss to manipulate me into thinking we had something that wasn't real. Alex stepped toward her, his voice pleading. I was trying to protect you. After the accident, you were so lost, and I thought if I could just remind you of what we had, things would go back to the way they were. Emma took a step back, her voice firm. The way things were? You mean a relationship that was falling apart? Alex's face crumpled, and for a moment, she saw the man beneath the facade, the man who had been holding on to something that had already slipped away. I didn't want to lose you, he whispered, his voice broken. I thought this was my chance to make things right. Emma felt a pang of sympathy, but it wasn't enough. I'm sorry, Alex, but whatever we had, it's gone, and it wasn't your place to rewrite my life. Alex's eyes filled with tears, and he reached for her hand. Please, Emma, don't walk away from this. I still love you. Emma looked at him, her heart heavy with regret. But I don't love you. With that, she turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the life Alex had tried so desperately to build for her. What would you do if you found out someone had rewritten your past to keep you in their life? Could you forgive them for manipulating you? Or would it be too much to overcome? Let me know what you think. The air outside Alex's apartment felt cold and sharp against Emma's skin as she walked away, her heart racing from the confrontation. Her hands trembled, and her mind was spinning, but for the first time since waking up in the hospital, she felt clear, free from the web of lies Alex had spun. Everything she had doubted, everything that hadn't felt right, had finally come into focus. The truth was painful, but it was hers now. She hadn't loved Alex. She wasn't his fiancée. She had been moving on with Daniel. But why had none of that returned to her before now? Why had it taken confronting Alex for the pieces to start falling into place? Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she glanced at the screen. It was Daniel. "Are you okay?" She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I just talked to Alex." "You were right." A few seconds later, his response came through. "Can I come over?" Emma's heart pounded. Part of her wanted to say no, to be alone with her thoughts. But another part of her, the part that felt a strange pull toward Daniel, even though her memories were still scattered, wanted him there. "Yes," she texted back. "I'll be home in 20 minutes. When Daniel arrived, Emma was sitting on her couch, her fingers nervously tapping against her coffee cup. The apartment was dim, and the quiet felt almost oppressive, like it was waiting for something to fill the space between them. Daniel knocked softly, and she opened the door to find him standing there, his face full of concern. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, his eyes searching hers. "I wasn't sure if I should come," Daniel said, his voice low. "But I didn't want you to go through this alone." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of his presence. She motioned for him to sit, and they both settled onto the couch, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. "I broke things off with Alex," Emma said after a long pause, her voice quiet. "He admitted everything, that we weren't engaged, that he was using my memory loss to try to make me stay." Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how, and I didn't want to push you." Emma looked at him, her heart heavy with a mixture of anger and relief. "Why didn't you? I feel like I don't know what to believe anymore. I trusted you, but you let me live in this lie for weeks." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I didn't want to confuse you even more. When you woke up and didn't remember anything, I thought maybe it would be easier if you started fresh. I thought maybe if you were happy with Alex, I should just let it go." "I wasn't happy," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I was confused. I didn't feel anything for him, and he kept telling me I would, but it never happened." Daniel met her gaze, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have told you, but the truth is I was scared. I thought you'd never remember us, and if I pushed too hard, I'd lose you." Emma's heart ached at his words, and the reality of what had been taken from her hit harder than ever. "I need to know the truth, Daniel. Everything." He leaned forward, his voice quiet but steady. "We were together. It wasn't official at first, but it was real. You were going to leave Alex for good. You'd already made up your mind. I remember the night before the accident. You told me you were done pretending to be someone you weren't. You wanted to move on, and we were ready to start something new together." Emma's breath hitched. She could feel the weight of those words, the pull of something familiar, but her mind still refused to unlock the memory. "I don't remember any of that," she whispered, her hands trembling. "Why can't I remember?" Daniel's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "It's not just about memory. It's about what you went through, physically and emotionally. The accident was traumatic, and your brain is protecting you by keeping some things buried. But you don't have to force yourself to remember all at once." Emma looked down at their joined hands. His touch felt right, like it belonged, and yet there was still a gap between them, something unresolved, something missing. "I had these flashes," Emma said, her voice barely audible. "Images of being with someone, of feeling safe. I thought they were just dreams, but maybe they were pieces of us." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe." A silence settled between them, thick with everything that had been left unsaid. Emma's mind raced with the possibilities, the questions still lingering in her heart. "Daniel," she asked quietly, "did I love you?" His breath caught, and for a moment he didn't answer. His eyes searched hers, and she saw the hesitation, the fear of saying the wrong thing. But then he nodded. "Yes," he said softly. "You did, and I loved you." Emma closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. She couldn't remember it, not fully, but she could feel the truth of it in the way her heart seemed to settle when he spoke, the way his presence felt like home. "I want to remember," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "But what if I can't?" Daniel leaned closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Then we'll start over. You don't have to remember everything for us to figure this out." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, and she felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, and she still wasn't sure when or if her memories would come back. But she knew one thing: Alex's version of her life had been a lie, and with Daniel, there was something real, something she could trust. She wiped at her eyes and looked at him, her voice shaky but determined. "I want to try." Daniel smiled, a mixture of hope and relief softening his features. "Then let's take it one step at a time." The next few weeks were a blur of slow steps and new beginnings. Emma spent time getting to know Daniel again, rebuilding their relationship piece by piece. They went on walks, had long conversations over coffee, and shared quiet moments where they didn't need to talk at all. Daniel never pressured her to remember. Instead, he gave her the space to explore her own feelings at her own pace. And while the memories didn't come flooding back all at once, Emma found herself feeling more at ease with him, more connected with each passing day. She was still struggling to find her footing, still grappling with the person she had been before the accident. But with Daniel, there was no rush, no expectations. One evening, as they sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Emma leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder. It felt familiar, like something they had done many times before. And for the first time, she felt a spark of recognition, not from a memory, but from her heart. "This feels right," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "It is right." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence, the quiet certainty that came with letting go of the past she couldn't remember and embracing the future she could create. The woman she had been before the accident was gone, but the woman she was becoming, piece by piece, day by day, was finding her way back to herself. Final reflection. As Emma walked through the next steps of her journey, she realized that love and memory were fragile things, shaped by both the past and the present. But she also understood that her identity wasn't defined by what had been lost. It was something she could rebuild, with the right people by her side. Would you be able to start over with someone you loved but couldn't remember? Could you rebuild a relationship based on trust, even without the memories to guide you? Let me know what you'd do in Emma's situation.